If Hugh Freeze wants to save his job at Auburn, he needs to go get Maalik Murphy.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your daily source to stay up to date with this, the greatest sport on planet Earth. This episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Kyle Whittingham and Mike Gundy are back in the Big 12. Okay, I have more than a couple of thoughts. Plus, BYU's playing Colorado in a bowl game. What are we doing? I don't really know. I'll give you three wide receivers that can shape a conference championship race. Look no further than Texas to see how and why. But let's start with Maalik Murphy. This is the most surprising quarterback entrant to the transfer portal to date. This dropped late on Monday night, and Maalik Murphy is the best, most proven quarterback available in the transfer portal. Some of you might say, John Mateer at Washington State is not in the portal, is planning to play in Washington State's bowl game. So no, Oklahoma fans, John Mateer is not on the way, at least not at this time. Circumstances can change, but Maalik Murphy's in the transfer portal, and he is considering Auburn. Other places could be a really good fit for Maalik Murphy, who quietly had a great season this year, but there's nobody that needs him more than Auburn. So the Tigers passed on going to the transfer market a season ago after the first year with Payton Thorne was, it's okay. They said, no, we'll run it back. It'll be better. We'll give him a run game. Cam Coleman's coming in. This will be better. Yeah, it wasn't. It wasn't. Don't let Payton Thorne's final stats at the end of the regular season here fool you. He was not good. He ends the year 63%, 21 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 2,700 yards in 11 games played. If I told you that before the year, then my preseason prediction of 8-4 for Auburn is probably pretty close to coming to reality. Maybe it's 6-6 or 7-5. It's better than what ended up happening where they miss a bowl game and regress from year one to year two. But those numbers are misleading. In the first 7 games of the season, Payton Thorne was under 250 yards passing. That is not a good look for a guy who's supposed to be an offensive quarterback kind of whisperer guru in Hugh Freeze. He's got a strong track record with quarterbacks in college, but it hasn't been delivered upon yet with Auburn. Maalik Murphy can get him there. And Payton Thorne was under 250 in 4 of those 7 games to begin the season and had 7 interceptions in those contests, including 4 in a home loss to Cal when they were 12.5-point favorites. So why is Murphy such a highly coveted guy? He just had one of the most under-the-radar, spectacularly good seasons in all of college football. For all the disappointing teams in the ACC, NC State, Virginia Tech come to mind, Duke was a pleasant surprise. Manny Diaz's first year. You remember Manny Diaz? Remember when he was the head coach of Miami once upon a time and got run out of town because, well, he's not good enough? And look, Mario Cristobal's doing well. It was not a good end to the season, but Mario Cristobal just had a 10-win regular season in year 3. That's an upward trajectory with a high level of recruiting. Manny Diaz was not a bad coach at Miami. He just wasn't as good as someone like Mario Cristobal should have been in that particular role, hence why they made the change, and it's working out right now. So Manny Diaz goes from being the defensive coordinator at Penn State to being the head coach at Duke. They just went 9-3. They had a preseason win total in the 4-5.5 range. And Maalik Murphy just set the Duke single-season passing record with 26 touchdowns. He only completed 60% of his throws, so not the most efficient guy in the world. I think that number can go up if he were to go to a place like Auburn, though. He went for just over 2,900 yards, the 26 touchdowns, and this is maybe my favorite stat that Auburn fans will care about with how this season went. Maalik Murphy, certainly there's a team around him. It matters. Maalik Murphy and Duke this year, in one-score games, Blue Devils were 6-1. 6-1. You go back to Murphy's time starting at Texas in the Big 12 a couple of years ago when Quinn Ewers was hurt. He was ahead of Arch Manning on the depth chart, and guess what? He came in, won those games, helped Texas get to the college football playoff. Went to Duke, was a star. I was not expecting this guy to go into the transfer portal. But Hugh Freeze is entering year 3, having just missed a bowl game with a regression from his first to his second year. I just don't know how patient Auburn's going to be. Now, they're still paying Brian Harsin money, I'm pretty darn sure. So that is perhaps a saving grace for Hugh Freeze. Maybe that gives him more leeway. Harsin was fired quickly into his second year. Well, not quickly per se. He did not complete his second season, and then he was relieved of his coaching duties. So at the very least, the precedent is set that patience is not going to be infinite down there at Auburn. And Maalik Murphy is a guy that comes in and gives you the level of quarterback production you were missing this year with Payton Thorne. I have been a Maalik Murphy fan since he was at Texas. I liked the move to Duke, and he was a driving force. By the way, not somebody who's just reliant on one particular receiver. He had not one, but two receivers over 700 yards this year. How does Auburn feel about their wide receiver room? Well, Cam Coleman has got all the potential in the world. They're going to lose Keandre Lambert-Smith, but that's what the transfer portal season is for. That's what recruiting has been for. Auburn, for all the flaws Hugh Freeze has had on the field, has had a lot of recruiting wins. They have recruited that position quite well. They have shown they can go and get guys in the transfer portal. I have no reason to believe they're not going to be doing that again, and that won't be part of the pitch they make to Maalik Murphy. Now, Auburn isn't going to be the only school that wants Maalik Murphy, but this should be the top priority for Hugh Freeze. Or if he has to go elsewhere in the quarterback market, maybe the buyout saves him time, but that hot seat starts to get really, really warm, because I don't see 2025 going a whole heck of a lot better if they can't get more production out of the quarterback position. That's what Auburn was missing. Do you realize that? Their defense, I watched them play this year, looked pretty good. Jarquez Hunter, really good running back. I don't think he had the season Auburn fans were necessarily hoping for, but the whole offense didn't, because it turns out when you don't have a quarterback, you don't have the ability to be at your best. And they opted, no, we're not going to go in the transfer portal to get a quarterback. Do you think that the Auburn quarterback of the future or of 2025 is on that roster? Because I have a sneaking suspicion that Walker White, not Walter White, but Walker White, and Hank Brown, if they're still Auburn Tigers come 2025, they're going to be serving in backup roles. And maybe they won't even be doing that, because there was a prediction I saw for Ashton Daniels, the Stanford quarterback, to go to Auburn. Let me tell you, if Ashton Daniels winds up as the Auburn starter in 2025, Auburn will miss a bowl game again. Daniels has shown some flashes whilst at Stanford, but makes too many bad decisions. And Troy Taylor, who I think is a good coach, wasn't able to coach it out of him. I don't think Stanford wanted to go with Ashton Daniels this year, but their young up-and-coming quarterback from the 2024 cycle, Elijah Brown, he got hurt. And so they were left with Daniels, and that is not an option. That's a backup option. Daniels could be a really quality backup quarterback. Come in a pinch, maybe start against a lower-level team if you have your starter get hurt. That's the sort of thing he could be good for. Ashton Daniels is not the answer. Maalik Murphy is the answer for Hugh Freeze to settle down any sort of pressure that is on him right now as Auburn's head coach, because he's not going to be fired after this season, but he could get fired after 2025. Comes down to the buyout. How badly do you want it? Those questions, completely valid. But eventually Texas A&M reached a breaking point. Auburn reached a breaking point once. Maybe they wouldn't again, but maybe they would. I've seen him do it before. Maalik Murphy, Auburn, that's a move that Hugh Freeze needs to make happen. Let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments, or hit me up on Twitter at SMcLaughlinCFB. So let's go over to the Big 12, shall we? Kyle Whittingham and Mike Gundy are back. BYU's playing Colorado in a bowl game. Well, that just needs to be sorted out across the board. Coming up next. First, let's talk about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, where you can tackle the NFL action. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. That's a pretty good deal. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, and it's all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, you can view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. The upcoming Army-Navy game this week, college football playoff first round games next week. Do you think you know how they're playing out? Do you have hunches, suspicions about who's going to win and by how many points? Go put your money where your mouth is at FanDuel.com. $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Gotta say, guys, I did not see this one coming. I'll get to Mike Gundy in a moment. Kyle Whittingham is returning as Utah's head coach in 2025. I'm not so certain that BYU isn't the reason why. Because Whittingham's been there for a long time. You know what everybody wants when you've had a long tenure in one particular place? When you become as important to a team, a fan base, a community as Kyle Whittingham is? You want a clean ending. You don't always get it. It doesn't always look like Peyton Manning, which wasn't pretty, but got the win in the Super Bowl riding off into the sunset. It doesn't always work out like Derek Jeter, game-winning base hit in extra innings to send off his final at-bat at Yankee Stadium. It doesn't always go that way. I think if Kyle Whittingham had found a way to beat Utah as Utes fans think they should have, or as Mark Harlan thinks they did, I am not of that particular mindset, but if that game had gone the way it should have at the end, not because of the holding penalty, but because Utah's defense should have been able to come up with a stop there, and yet they were just simply unable to, or the offense should have done, anything at all in the second half. If Utah finds a way to win that game, I think Kyle Whittingham retires. No, it wouldn't have been a perfect, pretty ending, but at least you wouldn't have had that sting in your mouth for the biggest rival that Utah has. So I think BYU, finding a way, as they did during that magical run when they were unbeaten, it came to a close, of course, and I'll talk about them in Colorado and that whole craziness and such. I think BYU winning that game. I think that ate away at Kyle Whittingham because he's named as head coach in waiting, remember? Morgan Scalley, defense coordinator. Yeah, he's going to be the head coach whenever Whittingham retires. And Kyle Whittingham has said, I don't think I'll be the head coach in 2027. So that means you're either out after this season or next year or 2026. He doesn't have that much time left. 2026, I think, is the last possible season he could be coaching in college football. I think he wants to go out successfully. I don't think he wanted to leave a program that feels like it's in more disarray than it has been in quite a long time for his defensive coordinator and say, you know what, this is a mess, you figure it out. I think he wants to give it one last hurrah, and I think he wants to get back at BYU. So if you're happy about Kyle Whittingham returning to Utah as the head coach in 2025, I think you should be thanking BYU. And BYU fans, if you wanted to see Kyle Whittingham return, you thank Jake Retzloff and the rest of the Cougars that found a way to win down by points, 4th and 10 inside your own 10-yard line late in the game. You thank them for that, and then we go from there. So, do I think it's going to work out? Yeah, absolutely could. But the Big 12 is a coaching carousel of stability and familiarity right now because you have Kyle Whittingham at Utah. You have Mike Gundy returning to Oklahoma State. You have Scott Frost returning to UCF. I've got the same opinion on all three of them. I need to see how the offseason goes, of course, for all the. Of course, you have to know what sort of players they're going to have, how the roster looks, who wins a quarterback battle in spring. All those sorts of things matter a great deal. I don't have a strong sense for any of these guys. Frost, Gundy, Whittingham. If you sent someone back from the future and said, hey, this guy, any one of those three, is having a lot of success, I'd say, yeah, that doesn't surprise me. If you sent someone back from the future and said, hey, this guy's flaming out, I'd go, yeah, I can see that too. None of these hires, or retentions, in the two cases, of course, are making me go, oh, this is going to be a home run, or this is automatically disaster. It's like, you got the opportunity for it to go one way or the other. So we'll see how the offseason goes. Mike Gundy, though, was almost relieved of his duties. I think Zach Robinson, the offensive coordinator for the Falcons, would have been a premier coaching target for Oklahoma State because he's a graduate, of course, and OC in the NFL. But Mike Gundy's sticking around, and they're changing their NIL approach, and they're doing all of these things. This is the worst season Mike Gundy's ever had in Stillwater. I'm not breaking any news there, right? Everybody understands that. Everybody gets a one-off. If you were to take a collection of golf scores from someone who is a low single-digit handicap or a scratch golfer, and you looked at their last 20 rounds, on the outset, you might think, if you don't know a lot about what it takes to get your handicap in that particular range, you might think, well, every score is going to be right around 75 or below. There isn't going to be anything above. But if you looked at those scores, you'd probably see a lot of, 72, 73, 75, 76, 72, 73, 74, 82. This was Mike Gundy's 82. He's still a scratch golfer in the coaching world, guys. I've watched him succeed at a really high level for way too long to think, oh, well, he suddenly, but no, had a bad year. It spiraled. He picked the wrong quarterback to believe in. Never liked that move. Didn't think it would go this poorly. Don't know why they weren't able to run the football better with Ollie Gordon, but alas, they weren't. You know what? Sometimes you just got to flush and say, okay, let's go back to the drawing board. I've got a major hitch in my swing, but I'm just going to do what everybody else in college football does or what everybody else in the golf world would do. I'm going to go get a lesson, work on the driving range, come back, ready to roll. What's Mike Gundy going to do? Go hit the transfer portal, stay on the recruiting trail. He's got a couple of new coaches in there, and go make some adjustments for next season. That's, I think, a pretty simple explanation as to how he fixes this. How do you rectify? There's no secret here. Mike Gundy knows it. He's seen plenty of ebbs and flows with the program. If next year is also a down year, yeah, okay, Gundy goes. You can say Mike Gundy goes. But after one season, as catastrophic as it was for Oklahoma State, you don't fire him after one season. He's got too much equity built up. He's proven too much for you to overreact to what is, in the grand scheme of things, so very little. Same thing with Kyle Whittingham. Oh, we want to get him out. Well, what was it an ideal situation? Look, Utah, please, for the love of all that is holy, pun intended, don't go with Cam Rising at quarterback. Just don't do it. Every Utah quarterback's hitting the transfer portal. If Cam Rising wants to play another year of college football, more power to him. But Utah needs to stop trying this again. Like this just the questions in 2023, and he never played. And the questions this year wasn't the same when he played and then wasn't able to stay healthy again. Just, you gave it a try. It was worth it, but it is definitely time to move on. And one other note on the Big 12 here. The Alamo Bowl is going to be a Big 12 game. This stinks. This stinks. Not because it won't be a fun game. It will be. Might be the most watched Alamo Bowl. Might be the most watched non-playoff bowl game of the season. Because remember, every game that you think of as a New Year's Six Bowl previously is now part of the college football playoff. And the Alamo Bowl was always a matchup that tended to draw a pretty solid television audience. But you put Colorado and the Buffs into that particular game, yeah, it's going to raise the level of interest and intrigue. Putting together two Big 12 teams, I understand how this happened. Colorado was in the Pac-12. The bowl games kept their ties to former Pac-12 schools. I get it. The reason that I think this is, number one, strange, and number two, kind of stinks, is bowl season can still serve a purpose. You can still get a barometer for where teams are. I'm not saying it's a perfect measurement across the board, but you could still get an understanding of, hey, this league versus that league, or this one was good, that one isn't good. What do you learn in this game? What are you going to learn? Which team was actually more qualified to make the Big 12 championship game, but didn't get in because of all the tiebreakers and such? Both went 7-2 in conference play, but neither one got to get in because of tiebreakers, and this team didn't beat that team and all that. That doesn't show us anything. I mean, it can give a glimpse into the future. I suppose, I guess, I'm just disappointed that there is a bowl game out there between two teams from the same conference. That's not what bowl season has ever been about. It is not always a perfect measurement with the opt-outs. It doesn't mean it gives you zero information about how good these conferences actually are or which teams were really good. Ole Miss, for instance. Ole Miss is going to have everybody opt into their bowl game after getting left out of the college football playoff, and Lane Kiffin saying, oh, we should be in, look at our record, our resume, and all this sort of stuff. They're playing Duke, who's not going to have Maalik Murphy, of course, because, well, he's looking elsewhere. If Ole Miss, with everybody playing, loses that football game, that's a blow to the SEC. Significant blow if you lose to Duke's backup quarterback. I don't suspect they will, but crazier things have happened in college football before. And that's just one example of what bowl season for the non-playoff teams can still show us. And having that aspect removed, it's strange and I think just unfortunate. If you don't agree, let me know in the comments, by all means. Last year, Texas reloaded the wide receiver position. Not saying Texas will, but somebody will. I'll give you 3 wide receivers that'll help a conference championship team coming up next. First, this episode brought to you by Omaha Steaks. Nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. It's guaranteed perfection in every single bite. And right now, you can save on unforgettable gifts with 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, score an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. With 5 generations of experience, they consistently deliver the world's best steak experience, and the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages featuring gourmet favorites. From legendary steaks to mouth-watering desserts and more, save 50% off site-wide for a limited time at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners get an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com. Yes, like the Peyton Manning Audible. And an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. Minimum purchase may apply. omahasteaks.com. The portal is a-poppin', and we are starting to see wide receivers go in that should make you turn your head. So, here are 3 guys. First, Michael Sturdivant from UCLA. Might be the most underrated wide receiver in the transfer portal. This is not a guy who's going to garner a lot of attention. Why? He doesn't have huge numbers. He hasn't played at big-time schools the last couple of years. 2 years at UCLA, where he was underutilized. 2 years at Cal, where he was closer to his full potential of being utilized. He has got 1 year left because he didn't play a whole lot his first year. His receiving yardage in the last 3 seasons, 1 at Cal and 2 at UCLA, have gone down each year. 755 yards in 2022. That was at Cal. 597 at UCLA in his first year with Chip Kelly. And then this past year under now fired offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy, 315 yards. This is not what this guy is capable of. This was a blue chip prospect coming out of high school. It was a great pull by Justin Wilcox in Cal. It was a great get in the portal for UCLA. He has not found a home. Don't let the numbers deceive you. He is 6'3", about 200 pounds. In this past season, he caught just 2 touchdowns. He had 22 receptions the entire year. That is hilariously underusing him. So this is a guy who could play in any conference in college football. If he goes to your team, then I'm curious what else is on the roster. I don't know that he's ready or still has the ability to. Maybe we'll see it reemerge. Maybe I'm underselling him here, but I think that he is a low-end number 1 receiver, but the highest end number 2 receiver. So think about a team like Auburn, for instance. They brought in a guy in Keandre Lambert-Smith to pair with Cam Coleman. Cam Coleman was stellar as a true freshman. He was this big heralded 5-star recruit, for those who don't know, and he's lived up to the hype. Cam Coleman's going to be there next year. But Keandre Lambert-Smith, the transfer from Penn State, who was also a 5th year, he's done now. Michael Sturdivant would be a great replacement. I mean a great replacement. And keep a solid receiving core for maybe incoming quarterback Maalik Murphy. We'll see if Auburn is ultimately able to land him. But there's a guy who's been around college football. There's a guy whose body is in really good shape. He has been durable over the last several years. Yards after catch, contested catches, good route runner. He is really solid. So if he's your number 1, you're in good shape. If he's your number 2, you have an elite wide receiving core. So that's the first guy to know about. Second guy, Micah Hudson. When you talk about untapped potential, here you go. Here you go. Hudson was a big-time recruit in the class of 2024, a 5-star. He went to Texas Tech, and it was a big win for Joey McGuire and company. And guess what? Like other places, they weren't able to maximize his talent, and thus he is in the transfer portal. He was the number 4 overall receiver according to 24/7 Sports. Number 4 overall guy. In 8 games played this year, he had 8 receptions for 123 yards. It didn't work out. It didn't work out for this reason, that reason, the other reason. You come up with whatever reason you want. But this is the sort of guy that when coming out of high school, if he committed to your school, you'd be really excited. You'd be stoked. Like, oh my gosh, this guy, he can make an instant impact as a freshman. He could do this. He's 6 feet tall, about 195 pounds, not quite as tall as Michael Sturdivant, but still a guy who's got tremendous versatility, who's still got plenty of potential. But you might look at his numbers from this year and say, oh, well, it didn't work out. Texas Tech was, they were just like a pogo stick bouncing up and down all season long. They ended with an 8-4 record, which is where I had them coming into this year. But they just weren't able to figure out where he fit into the offense, and they had other weapons. They brought in a guy in Josh Kelly from Washington State, who was really good. And that's where Baron Morton looked a lot more often. So Micah Hudson is, again, not somebody who you should judge based on his numbers and say, well, I mean, he didn't do anything. Like, this applies to Jonte Cook II as well, who I believe is looking at Texas A&M in addition to Oregon. Former 5-star receiver, under 200 yards receiving in each of his first 2 campaigns as a Texas Longhorn. But the guy who you see on film that warranted such a high grade, according to recruiting services, he's still in there. He just hasn't been unleashed. He's a caterpillar. He's looking for the coach that turns him into a butterfly. So Micah Hudson, definitely a name that can go somewhere and make an impact. And I'll talk about how this ties to Texas in just a moment. But KC Concepcion, he's been in the portal for a bit longer. And I think that he's someone that is he's different. He's different. He reportedly, according to Bama Football on YouTube, was looking at Alabama. It's not the only place that has said he's looking at Alabama. But KC Concepcion, 5'11", 190 pounds. Here's what I see in him. Silas Bolden at Texas. It's one of 3 wide receiver transfers that they brought in. Same sort of, kind of a gadget guy, but also a better all-around receiver than you would probably think. The interesting thing about Concepcion is I don't know what his NFL prospects are, but he's got 2 years of eligibility left. So he could settle in and be a 2-year starter for somebody. In his freshman campaign, he had 839 yards and 10 touchdowns. And then this past year, it all went wrong for NC State. Most things went wrong. Name an area of a football team. Think about NC State. It did not go well for Dave Doran and company. 460 yards and 6 touchdowns this season. So he's in the transfer portal, could go to a variety of places. And when I think about guys like this making an impact, I look at what Texas did in the transfer portal, and these are the sorts of guys, they're not the only ones, but they are some of the biggest ones. These are the sorts of guys that can step in and revamp your receiving core right away. Or they can supplement your receiving core if you've got a strong returning group of guys and you're looking for that one other piece. Any of these guys could absolutely do that. So Texas is a great example of what I'm talking about with these guys. So the Longhorns lose a trio of wide receivers from a college football playoff and Big 12 champion team last year. Jordan Whittington goes in the 6th round, Adonai Mitchell in the 2nd, Xavier Worthy goes in the 1st. And he's, of course, a part of the 12-1 Kansas City Chiefs offense. It's pretty darn good. So you lose all of those guys. And what does Steve Sarkisian do? Hits the portal. Isaiah Bond transfers in from Alabama. Boom, instant impact. Silas Bolden, who, again, I compare to KC Concepcion. I think there are a lot of similarities between those guys in the way that they could be involved. They could fit in a Steve Sarkisian offense, by the way, if they have departures from that particular room. But they bring in Silas Bolden. They bring in Isaiah Bond. They bring in Matthew Golden from Houston. What are all of those guys? Studs. You look at that Texas receiving core. When the Longhorns offense struggles, I never get the sense that it is the fault or the problem is rooted in the wide receiver room. It usually feels like it's more about what the quarterback has not been able to do. Quinn Ewers, not a particularly consistent guy. So these are 3 guys, J. Michael Sturdivant, Micah Hudson, and KC Concepcion, that are going to be able to find roles on teams that can push for a conference championship. And last year, Texas was just one example. They're certainly not the only one. Evan Stewart went to Oregon from Texas A&M. Felt like he had a lot of untapped potential. And you know what? He hasn't been Oregon's leading receiver. That's Tez Johnson. But he's been a guy who, in big games like Ohio State, for instance, or games when Tez Johnson's been out, has been instrumental to Oregon orchestrating an undefeated regular season here. So I am more than a little curious to see where these guys end up, because somebody, somewhere, is going to get an impact wide receiver in any of these guys. And in 2025, you're going to think back to shows like this one, and you're going to say, hey, I remember when that guy at the portal and Spencer was talking about it. Now here he is with X new team, insert whoever you think they might wind up with, and now they're making impact plays. Roster building starts as the season goes on, because college football just doesn't always make sense. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time, and until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.